Oh, excellent. Thank you. I just realized I was still on mute. Thanks, Jay, for pointing it out. Okay, I'm gonna repeat what I was saying earlier. Thank you for all those who answered the quick poll. Looks like most of you are at number one, so you need getting help getting started, and that's good. We're going to start with a 30,000 view. I'm going to start you with what is Sumo and how to start using it. And then for those of you who said that you're a little bit dangerous with what you know, we're going to get you to a level where you have the basic knowledge so that you're not dangerous anymore when creating this stuff. So let me close this poll for now. Let me hide it here. How do we go about doing that? And we will get started. Hide results. Excellent. So you should now be able to see my screen. I will, by the way, I get these questions all the time. I will share these slides. I will share the recording for this as well. So expect an email from me sometime in the next couple of days with a recording as well as the slides for this webinar as well. You're all muted, as you noticed, but feel free to send questions through the questions tab. I will try to respond them as I go, but if you don't want to send them during the webinar, there will be time for Q&A at the end as well. So we have about 90 minutes. I think we're going to leave about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions as well. All right, so most of you, actually let me backtrack a little bit here. Let me just pull up this. Most of you joined through this page, Sumo Logic training, and you came here and you're now attending Sumo Logic QuickStart. I do want to point out that this is kind of an intro course, and it's going to show you a lot of what we can do with Sumo Logic. For those of you, for some people that's enough, and then they go play with it and they hack it and they figure it out. For those of you who need a little more hand-holding, there's this one called Using Sumo Logic, and this one's paired up with some very good labs as well, which I'll show you in just a second. And then for those of you who are administrators, you will want to join this Setting Up Sumo Logic, where we talk about data collection, the different deployment options, and whatnot. So there's a little bit of everything for everyone. But the next thing I wanted to point out is that we do have certification. We recently launched it. And as you will notice down here, I'm going to skip all the marketing stuff and go to the certifications themselves. The certifications mimic the training that I just showed you. So for those of you today on this call, after watching this webinar and running through this tutorial, which is a hands-on tutorial, you should be able to take your exam for level 1 certification. For those that attend the Using Sumo Logic webinar and try this hands-on labs, you should be able to attempt level 2. And level 3 is coming in the next couple of months. So if I invite you to try it out, you have 3 attempts, and you can try to get your certification after this webinar as well. Okay. So let's get back to this. The idea with Sumo is, or the idea with the webinar today is to get you started with how to use Sumo. I'm going to start with a demo. How does Sumo Logic help me? What's in it for me? Most of you are probably using Sumo for logs, but I want to show you how you can use logs and metrics within Sumo and correlate them to do the troubleshooting. We'll then go into, well, what data is available to me? Perhaps you're a newbie in your company to Sumo Logic and data is already there, and how do you find out what data is available so that you can start analyzing? Maybe someone told you, oh, go and figure out what our web servers are doing, and you don't even know if your web server data is in it. So we're going to talk about how do I start finding what data is available to me. And then once you know which data is available, we're going to start looking at how can I search, how can I parse that data, how can I start analyzing, how can I give it structure, and doing my analysis, which I really care about that data. But that's really just the beginning of it. At the end of the day, what you really want to do is step number 4. You want to start creating your dashboards. You want to start creating your alerts, because that's how you get Sumo to work for you. You want to start monitoring trends, whether it is outliers. You want to start figuring out if things are going up or going down. And you want to start identifying your critical events. So you want to be alerted of the stuff that is going on in your environment. So steps 1, 2, and 3 are just stepping stones to really get to number 4, which is how can I really get Sumo to work for me? And then last but not least, I'm going to leave you with quite a few resources of how else can you learn Sumo Logic within here. All right, so let's get started. How does Sumo Logic help me? What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a troubleshooting demo that uses both logs and metrics. The first step is I'm going to be receiving an alert. Actually, I don't have my I don't have Slack running, but you can imagine that you can receive an alert, and that alert can be pointing you to a dashboard similar to this one to tell you there is some critical event that just happened. Go and take a peek at that. Once you start looking into those dashboards, you're going to start looking through your metrics, and you're going to be identifying what is going on. What are the symptoms? What's happening in my environment? So think of metrics that help you figure out the what is happening in my environment. But then I'm going to show you how I can correlate those metrics to the logs, and that's really going to tell me the why. Why are things happening? So that you can take action. Knowing what is happening doesn't really tell you what to do, but identifying why something is happening can lead you to some action to fix those kinds of things. All right, so with that said, let me switch to the instance. I'm going to try to use the instance as much as possible. Few slides, but mostly the environment, so you guys can play with it. What I'm going to do is I'm using this fake company called Travelogic that allows you to book flights, it allows you to book hotels and car hire, and it's a modern app, right? It's got services in the background, it's got microservices, if you will. It's very similar to what you guys are running in your environments. And what I'm doing is I'm raking all these logs, I'm taking all the logs from Travelogic and I'm ingesting them into Sumo Logic. And with that, I have a dashboard that I've built that is showing me the operational overview of my Travelogic environment. And notice that actually I do have some alerts configured that are being delivered to a Travel Ops channel. I'm going to skip just showing you the Slack message, but what I have in that Slack message is a pointer to this dashboard. It's a link, and that link brings me to this dashboard. And if I look at this dashboard, if everything was green, I'd be pretty happy, but it looks like some stuff is happening in there. And this is me kind of inserting some errors into my Travelogic. But before I dive into the details, what I want to show you is that this dashboard here that you're seeing is an aggregation of all the things I want to keep an eye on, because this is an overview, right? So I've got my reporting nodes in the top left, followed by my 500s from my load balancer. I've got response times, I've got my VPC network rejects, I've got database information, I've got I might have different services like my products service versus my checkout service. I mean, this here is very concerning, right? What this is telling me is that people are customers are going in here, they're booking locations or they're booking hotels, and for some reason they're not able to check out. They're not able to, they put stuff in the cart, and then at the end they're not able, once they put their credit card history and all that stuff, they're not being able to check out. So not a good sign. What I can do is I can configure these dashboards to give me a little more detail. For example, I'm going to click on that checkout service. And what this is going to do is it's going to open another dashboard that is giving me a little bit of drill down information. So here's my Travelogic services detail. And if you notice, I'm gonna show you quite a bit on this dashboard, but I'm gonna try not to overwhelm you. But it looks like in terms of bookings, the bookings that people have been able to do on my travel site, things were great. I was green, but somewhere around 12:45 if you're in the East Coast, or 9:45 if you're in the West Coast, it looks like my bookings dropped. And then this orange one, if you look at the bubble there that pops up in black, the metric is the sum of the failed counts. So the number of failures spiked around 12:45. So something happened around 12:45. I was having a lot of bookings, and then I have a count of my failed bookings that spiked up there. If you look at the one on the right-hand side, hold on, there's a question from Ken here. The question from Ken is, are these dashboards being updated real time? Good question, Ken. So you can configure it to update real time. Mine are not, only because it's a demo, but you see this little thing up here called live mode. If I were to just turn that into live mode, then yes, my dashboards would just be updated in real time, and I can now put them up on a big screen in my operations center, or I can share it with others, and it's just being updated. But the way that it's set up right now, it would require me to do some sort of a refresh if I need to. All right, hope that answers your question. Okay, the cool thing about this dashboard is, notice how it has metrics, like in this case, count of my my successful bookings versus my failed bookings. It has log data. Actually, log data would be like this one here. It's got the number of errors by node. So it looks like I'm having some nodes that are having a lot of errors. If you look at that one, it looks like my customer service team .travel dash checkout node, one of the travel checkout nodes, is having some sort of issue. So you're starting to see how, with my metrics, I identified that people that I'm having some failed bookings, but I can start diving into the logs and start finding out what's going on. I already, with just a quick glance, know that there's some issue with my checkout nodes. Notice this one and this one here is having some issues. This panel here is showing me errors in the last 7 days, so I can compare the errors right now, which seem to be spiking pretty high, compared to the kind of errors I was getting in the last 7 days. For example, this green one here is the errors in the last 2 days for this same time period. Looks also like I'm having some gateway latency issues. This pink triangle here is identifying some kind of outlier. So things were stable, and again, around 12:45, something happened, and my gateway latency average is having some issues there. Let's focus on this one up here. This one is my CPU and total memory. It looks like things were stable, and again, at 12:45, I have a spike, and this spike happens to be on that travel checkout node. Again, if you notice, I'm kind of hovering over those lines, and it's telling me that the travel checkout nodes are having some issue when it comes to CPU total. So from here, I've already got a pretty good idea. I know what is going on. I don't know why, though. So here's where I want to show you how you can transition from a metrics world into a logs world to start identifying what's going on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this icon here, that it's going to allow me to go and view this same panel, but in an interactive mode where I can run more queries if I want to. I can, for example, maybe I don't care to look at the CPU. I'm sorry, look at this one. This is memory usage. So I'm just going to go down here. This is the metric memory usage. I'm going to toggle this one off so that I can really focus just on CPU total. In this case, I'm running CPU total average by node, and I see that these travel checkout nodes are the ones that are giving me some grief, right? I won't go into all these other details in here for now, but just know that I can change settings. I can change the lines. For perhaps I want to change the chart type to an area chart and all that good stuff that you would expect from this thing here. But what we really want to find out is what's going on in my environment. I have a huge spike. I don't know what errors are showing up in my logs around that time. So what I'm going to do is I have the ability down here to look for errors, and I'm just going to choose something called source category. I'm going to talk a lot more about that. But source category is just a tag. It's a way that I tag my data so that I know how to search for it. And I know that my data is for the customer service team, and in particular, it's the travel checkout data. I have a good idea that the travel checkout data is having some issues, right? So I can run this query, CS travel checkout, and it's going to, what it's going to do is it's going to give me a good sense of all the logs that I've had in that particular time period. So there you go. This overlay that you see up here is the number of messages. You see how I scroll and it changes the number of messages. The darker the line, the darker the square, the more messages that have happened in that area. And it looks like around this same time, I started having a lot more messages. So clearly something is going on there. As a matter of fact, let's do this. Why don't I add the keyword error? Because that way, it's going to filter out only those logs that have the word error in it. And look at this. I had no errors or very few errors before, and then all of a sudden, again around 9:45, I had a lot of errors that are going on, and it looks like something is happening. So, as most of you probably have done in the past, what you really want to do is you want to look at those logs. You want to find out what those errors are all about. You could do it two ways. The first way is you could click on log messages, and it shows you it shows you the errors for that particular time. Why is it not showing it to me? Well, I'm going to show you the better way anyway. The second way that you can do it is you can do a shift click. If you notice that little bubble tells you shift plus click to open and search. So I'm going to do a shift click, and what that's going to do is it's going to open up all my log messages in this in this world where I can really analyze and configure them and all that stuff. And you notice it brought back about 737 results for that specific time period that have the word error in it. One of the things that I could do is I could start scanning through these. I think we're all we're all guilty of having done that in the past. Mind you, though, it's 30 pages, so this will take us a lot to go through. Or I can use this easy button called log reduce. But I'm going to do something even better. I'm going to say, you know what? Instead of just giving me the error messages for that time period, give me everything. I'm going to show you why. A lot of times, what creates the error is doesn't necessarily have the word error in it. You might have done something, or something might have been done in the system that caused the error. So by widening my search and searching for anything in that particular time period, and I could even widen the time period if I wanted to. I could say, all right, give me the last 60 minutes. So right now you're probably wondering, hey Mario, hold on a second. You're making the time period a lot bigger. You're not filtering by anything. The reason for that is because I'm going to use this little easy button here called log reduce. And while it runs, I'm going to talk a little bit about what it does. What log reduce is doing right now is it's raking through those, can't remember how many messages it was, let's say 10,000 messages. It is pairing them, or it is categorizing them into what we call signatures. So it's telling me, if you notice here, it's telling me you've got about 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 signatures that all have this kind of same format. Yes, the data is going to be different because, which one? I think it was this one. The date is going to be different because they all have a different timestamp, and perhaps the, I don't know, perhaps the IP address is going to be different, and maybe the message is slightly different. But for the most part, the messages are very similar. So what it's doing is it's really reducing the noise that I hear. It's getting rid of, like, let's look at this one. There's 7,000 messages that all look very similar. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to bubble up the things that I really care about. Look at this one. This is saying there's 2,000 messages that have some sort of error because the SSL routine, it looks like it was some sort of get server certificate error, certificate verify failed. So quite a few messages. So now I'm getting a pretty good idea what's going on, right? It looks like the certificate failed. I'm getting some SSL server certificate. This to me is pointing to the fact that I might have some bad certificate, and that's not allowing people to book their flights. So the metrics were, there's something wrong. People can't book their flights. The logs are telling me, hey, there's something bad in here. And if I look at the bottom one, look at this one in here. It says that the Travelogic app is cluster for the service checkout has a version 1.14.dev. So to me, that's the culprit. It looks like someone deployed development code into my production environment, which has the wrong SSL certificate, which is causing the errors when people are trying to book. So you've seen how I went from metrics into logs, and then I can backtrack from logs all the way to metrics to start identifying things. Just to complete the circle, let me show you this here. What I did later on as I was putting this together is to this dashboard in here, I created a little, I created another panel here that is showing me the deployed versions. So in reality, in the future, I could have checked that, oh yeah, I had the right version, but then all of a sudden around 8:16, so sometime today at around noonish, I deployed the wrong version of the wrong version of the code into these two travel checkout nodes, which caused all that chaos in my environment. All right, let me pause here for just a second and see if anybody has questions around this. What I wanted to show you is, since most of you are fairly new to Sumo, is what can you really do? And you notice that the power in this was that I was getting Sumo to work for me. Sumo alerted me with a message to my Slack channel. Sumo showed me a lot of reds in that dashboard so that I can start taking action on this stuff. Okay, if there's no questions, let me switch context here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of this instance and I'm going to switch to a training instance instead. And the reason I'm going to do that is because a lot of the samples and tutorials that you're going to be using is using that training instance. So that will make it a little easier. Oh yeah, So Jay is asking if you need to have that beta UI in order to use log reduce. Let me log back into the system and show you. The answer is no, Jay, but let me just show you here in just a second. Let me log back into my training instance. Training, and I'm going to log in as myself. Let me just go in here. This will take just a second, and we will get back on that. There we go. I'm going to close some of these tabs that I don't need. Okay, so the question was, if you notice, we were looking at a new log, and if I just run a query, for now I'm just going to run a quick star, which means give me everything for the last 15 minutes, and there's a log reduce button here. The question was, do I have to use this new beta UI for the log reduce? And the answer is no. That log reduce functionality is available in the old UI. As a matter of fact, I'm going to switch back to the classic UI. I highly encourage you guys use the new UI because there's going to be a lot more functionality coming out very, very soon that is not going to be available in the old UI. Anyway. All right. There's another question from Ken. It says, will Sumo Logic work with Quip? Ken, I am not familiar with Quip myself, so I don't have an answer for you. But if you want to shoot me an email, I'd be happy to find out for you. Mario@sumologic.com. And if I find the answer, I will send it to everybody here at Sumo. But if it's just data that you're getting out of Quip, we can certainly ingest it within Sumo itself. All right. So I am going to switch back to the new UI just to show you guys that new UI. I highly encourage that you do use this one. All right, one login is going to be bothering me here quite a bit. Let me close all these queries because this is probably where you guys will start. You join, you start with Sumo. You most likely will not have recently opened dashboards, recently run searches, recommended dashboards, because you don't have any data in there, right? You probably won't have anything in your personal folder, but you might be able to find some stuff from the org, meaning your peers could have created some content, and you can go look at that content from there as well. But let's start from 30,000 foot view. You just joined, or you just got an account. You joined the instance. And the first thing that you want to know is what kind of data exists. Who has logged any data into our Sumo environment? At a 30,000 foot view, the data flow is broken into three areas. One is collect data. Let's get data into Sumo Logic, and this is usually done by a few administrators, 1 or 2 people, versus the rest of you who are going to be using Sumo. But the collectors, the data is brought in through collectors and sources. There's a whole new webinar called Setting Up Sumo Logic for that, so we won't spend too much time there. We're going to be spending time in number 2 and number 3, which is, all right, now that I have that data, how do I search it? How do I analyze it? How do I use the operators that are available to me? And the third one is, great, now that I know how to analyze that data, how do I make sure Sumo is alerting me, whether it is using dashboards or whether it's using alerts, how do I make Sumo work for me in this case, right? So I promised I wasn't going to talk too much about data collection, but there's just a little bit, enough for you guys to understand the context. Data collection can be done cloud to cloud, for example. So if you look at that top half of this diagram, I can get data from AWS, so S3 buckets into Sumo. Perhaps I can do cloud to cloud log collection from Akamai, as you see here. There's also APIs to SaaS and PaaS platforms, for example, Google Apps and Office 365. You could even do an HTTPS post from clients, like say your mobile, into Sumo Logic. So that's cloud-to-cloud integration or cloud-to-cloud collection. We can also do a collection from your machines themselves. And there's 2 flavors of that. There's centralized collection and local data. Let's start with local data. So here on the right-hand side, I could have some Linux servers, some Windows servers, whatever the case might be, Ubuntu, and I can put an agent, or it's called a collector. I could put a small piece of software in that machine, and that machine will be gathering the files that you specify that you want, bringing them over to Sumo Logic. If your servers cannot have anything installed on it, or for example, they do not have access to the outside world, then you can do this kind of scenario, which is a centralized scenario where You have your machines sitting here, and then you have a collector in a central location. You can send data over that collector over SSH or WMI. That collector can grab that data and on to Sumo Logic. And the last one that I want to show you here is, what if you have network devices, firewalls, routers, whatever the case might be. You can syslog the data. You can send the data over syslog over to that collector and on to Sumo Logic. So again, a whole webinar around this about best practices and what you should use when and where. But one of the things I did want to talk about is, when you are collecting data, you set up this thing called the metadata. And think of metadata as just tags. These are tags that your data gets stamped with, so that as the data is coming into Sumo, you get tagged and you can easily use those tags to search for your data. For example, if I want to search data just by collector, I might have a collector sitting somewhere and I want to get all the data from that collector. By source, it might be Apache access versus Apache error data. Perhaps by a host itself. So you could do a host. Source name is pretty cool. It's actually the name and the path of the log file itself. So you can search your data by that as well. And the last one is an interesting one. It's really powerful because this one can be freely configured, and it can be anything that you want. We have best practices around that, but here is a good example of how you can do it. You could say, for all my prod environments for my Apache access data. And if you search that, if you search for this source category, it's going to search across all the different web server hosts that have prod Apache access data. So you'll see me use source category quite a bit to pull up my data as I'm going through this. All right, so what data can I analyze? What's available to me to begin searching? There's two ways to find out what data is available to me. Feel free to be switching into your instance as I go through here, through this. But the first way, or the official way, is you can navigate in the UI. You can go to Manage Data, and under Manage Data, you can go to Collection. In the old UI, by the way, it's up at the top and it says Manage Collection. Takes you to the same screen. And what this screen is showing me, let me get a little bit more real estate here. What this screen is showing me is all the different collectors that I have and the sources for those collectors sending data. Let's take this one here at the top. I have a collector called the Apache Tomcat. It's a hosted collector, meaning it's cloud to cloud, and it's receiving Apache Tomcat data, and it's receiving Apache Tomcat access data. And these guys here are the source categories. This is how I would find that data, right? Similar down here, I have another collector called the Artifactory collector, which is hosted, and it's pulling all these different sources from that data. So you notice how I can have a collector with multiple sources. If I wanted to search any of this data, I could just click on this little icon, and it's going to open a tab, and it's going to run a quick search for that source category for the last 15 minutes, which is the default, and start pulling that data for me. All right, pretty good. Let me close that for now. If you want to search for something specific, let's say I want to search for my Apache data, or perhaps I want to pull in my box data, I can type box, and it's going to go and search only the collectors that I'm looking for in there, right? So this is one way that you can start finding what data is in there and what source categories are available. Let me show you another cheeky one to do it. You can open a log search and just say, give me everything, and then do a count by source category. And what you see, category, what you see I'm doing here, oops, category is misspelling a lot. What you see me doing here is I'm starting to show you that I can start aggregating my data. In this case, I'm just doing it by account. I could have done the last 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes, but last 15 minutes is default. And there you go. I can start seeing what source categories are available, probably a little easier to find what you're looking for. If I was looking for my lab's Apache access data, which I have a lot of, I can just go in here and start searching that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you. Open a new tab, go to logs, and say, okay, give me anything where source category. And you notice these guys here. These are those other metadata tags. There's a few extra ones like index and view, which I'll talk about later on, but these are the same metadata tags that you can use for searching your data. So I'm going to say source category equals labs Apache access. I can run that, and for the last 15 minutes, I seem to have about 53,000 messages of Apache access data. All right, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to move forward with it. This is the basic stuff, right? This is how do I search my data? I can easily go in there. It gets a little more interesting. I can search only those that have the word Mozilla in it, for example. And you notice I literally just put the word Mozilla, and out it came. It is not case sensitive, so I just changed it to lowercase Mozilla. And the and that goes in here, this and is implicit. You notice that I didn't have to put the and it still found it. But I could have, if it's an or, of course, you have to specify it, but an and is implicit. You can do keywords as well. I'm sorry, wildcards, I should say. What if I want to find anything that has the word Mozilla in it? I can search that, and you notice my results down at the bottom are finding messages with the word Mozilla in it. Pretty straightforward. Okay. So let me just, to make sure that you guys are following, how can I start analyzing my data? Pretty easy. I can start searching. I can start easily searching here. But let me take a step back. What if you were asked to go analyze your Apache access data, right? So now you know you have Apache access data, and this is how you find it. Here's my Apache access data. If I were you, and let's say that our instance has been running for some time. I'm just a newbie in our organization using Sumo Logic. What I would do first is I would go find if someone's already done the work. Has someone already analyzed the lab's Apache access data? Because if so, there's no point in me recreating the wheel. So let me show you how to find that kind of stuff. This is the Home tab, which I was showing you before. This is where I can see queries that I've run and all that good stuff. But in here, there's also a tab that lets me navigate through the folders of content that are out there. This is my folder, my personal folder. I just happen to have some data here for training purposes. But you can always go to the org folder and say, all right, in the org folder, which you're seeing here, all the different people that have created content in the org folder and decided to share it, I can go and search for something specific. I can go search for Apache. And if I search Apache, look, there's a whole bunch of content here that has the word Apache in it. Here's an Apache overview, Apache visitor access type. Perhaps that's exactly what I was looking for. So it's great. Let's go take a peek at this Apache overview. So you notice what I did is it gives me a little bit of detail here, by the way. What I did is I went and searched, has anybody already started searching Apache data and analyzing it, because there's no point for me to recreate the wheel. And I opened someone's dashboard, and I can see that they're doing an overview where they see visitor locations, they're doing traffic distribution by server, they are doing a traffic volume and bytes served, and they were doing responses over time. So this is cool. This might be exactly what I needed, or if I needed something slightly different, at least I have a good beginning. The reason I'm saying that you have a good starting point is because all of these panels that are in here, you can go to the back end and figure out how they were put together. For example, I'm going to click on this one here, and I'm going to go and show the search behind it. All right, don't get scared. That's a lot of writing in there, and it looks like it's a lot, but by the end of today, you will be able to make sense of this really easily. Let's say that I really only cared about client and server errors. I don't care about successes and redirects. I can easily edit this query, get rid of these guys here. Of course, I would have to get rid of them in here as well. So let's see, some as redirects, and what was the other one? And oh, successes. Here we go. And successes. And now I've just edited this, I've just changed this query. I can run that query and see that now I only have the results that I care for. And it's great because I got my results. I didn't have to go learn all the syntax and figure it out. It was pretty easy to go and take something that already existed and tweak it. All right, good deal. So I've shown you that you don't have to start from scratch. Go and find out if something already exists. Search through the library and find it. What if I did search through the library, like I showed you here, and nothing came back? What if I had nothing here? Then another great option for you is go and find out if Sumo Logic already has an app for this source of yours. So there's something called the app catalog. And the app catalog has out-of-the-box content for a lot of the common sources. So we know AWS config, we know RDS, we know Azure Audit, we know Cisco ASA. So you can install one of these apps, and it's going to give you a lot of content that is already analyzing your data. Okay, it might not give you 100% of what you're looking for because perhaps your use case is very specific, but it certainly gives you a lot of information. Let me give you an example. Let's take that same Apache one. So I'm just going to do Apache. There are a couple of apps here for Apache Tomcat and Apache. So I'm going to click on this one, and it shows me, all I have to do is add it to my library. I can preview the dashboards that are going to get installed. So I can see that's going to be the Apache overview, the visitor access, and so on. There's all these dashboards, so I can see what it's going to get installed. But also down here is the list of everything. Not only am I going to get all these dashboards installed, all these other queries are going to get installed as well, which could be very, very beneficial for my analysis. So I'm going to add it. I'm going to show you how to go ahead and add an app. Click on Add to App. It asks you what you want to call it. Let me call it September 2017 because I might have already another one installed. You can put it in your personal folder, or if in your personal folder you have other folders, you can put them in there as well. I'm going to put it in my apps folder. And then there has to be a way for you to tell Sumo Logic how to find that Apache Access data. Well, remember our friend, the source category? What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, yes, go and find existing source categories. And mine happens to be called, I believe it was Labs Apache Access. So as simple as that, I am mapping my data to all these dashboards. If I had, let's say that I wanted to just do it for certain collectors, then I can use this custom filter. And I can say, oh, I want where collector equals ABC, and, oops, if I could spell collector. But you get the point. And source category or source equals DEF. Right? So you could always use some custom data filter as well. But let's keep it simple. We will go to the source category, Lab Apache Access. I click on Add to Library. And what Sumo is doing right now is it's grabbing all that content, copying it to my folder. And once it copies it, it adds the Labs Apache Access source category. And there you go. In my personal folder, under Apache, under apps, sorry, I have a folder called Apache September 2017. And this is all that content that just got installed for me. Let's open a few of these dashboards so you can see them. I'm just going to double click on some of them here. I'm going to go back to my folder and double click a few. Actually, that server operations one is a good one as well. I'm going to open this one here. All right. So notice, in less than 5 minutes, I was able to, oh, looks like I don't have, did I just do something wrong? Let me find out what I did. Oh, sorry. Look at this. I actually installed it with the wrong stuff in there rather than switching it to what I wanted. Yes. Jay just corrected me and say when we select data source, it does not populate the list. Oh, so Jay's question is, let me see. It says when you select data source, it doesn't auto-populate the list. I'm not sure what you're asking there, Jay. I'm not sure what list you're talking. Oh, I see. The list to install. It should populate it. Just for context for everybody, let me backtrack here because I did a mistake. I actually left collector and source, and of course it doesn't find any data that exists like that, so it just installed this bad stuff. So let me just go back here. Let me close all tabs, all other tabs, I should say, and let me do it again. I'm going to click on Add to Library. I'm going to put in the apps folder. I'm going to put it in a new folder because I really don't need that one. So I'm just going to put in that and call it September. Okay. And I think, Jay, what you were saying is that it wasn't auto-populating these. It should auto-populate them. One of the reasons why it wouldn't is if you have a user that has restrictions to the kind of data that you have. for example, you're not an administrator, but you're an analyst, and there are some restrictions set up to you in terms of you can only see X data or Y data, then you wouldn't have this full list in here. But let me go do that. Let me go to Labs Apache Access, click on Add to Library, and now I should be able to install it appropriately. All right, installed it. It brought it up here. Let me open a few of these. So I'm going to open this one. And how about server operations one, which is always a good one. Okay, so let's just open, well, that's good. Okay, so in this case, what it's doing is from a web server operations, I can see things like 10 bots that I'm gathering, client locations for the 404s, server errors over time. I can see non-response status codes, top 5 clients causing 400 errors. So again, it's probably not everything that you need, but it certainly gives you 80, 90, maybe even 95% of what you need to start analyzing for those sources. Error log levels, 5 URIs, and so on. Here's this one just showing you visitor access types. So the different platforms is over here on the top left-hand side. Popular devices, top 10 PCs, browsers, and operating systems. And the cool thing, like I said before, about this is that any one of these dashboards, you can always go and click on this guy here. It's going to show you the search behind it, and you can see how it was put together. So in this case, we're going to come back to this one because we're going to build this one from scratch so you guys can learn. But I'm looking at, I look for certain status codes, and then I map that IP address to that kind of stuff. Right? So you can use this as learning tools to figure out how to build queries in there. Okay. If there's no questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start showing you how you can analyze that data. So I showed you there's published content that you can take advantage of. There are Sumo Logic apps that you can also take advantage of by going into the app catalog. But let's say this is your custom data. There are no apps because it's your custom app. You're logging your custom app, and you want to start figuring out how to search that data. The syntax for that looks something like this. You specify the metadata, like the source category. You specify any keywords, and then you can pipe that to another operator to start parsing the data, for example, start filtering the data, or start aggregating that data. So the piping, it's very similar to your Unix commands, right? You can grep something, you can pipe it, and so on. So very similar syntax. Let me just show you how we can start doing that. So let's go back to the instance. And let's close some of these. Let's stick with Apache Access Data because you are all probably fairly familiar with Apache Access Data. So I'm going to open brand new tab, and I'm going to say source category equals labs Apache Access. Great. I can run that query for the last 15 minutes, and I get my results. I got about 57,000 results. Mind you, I can choose different time frames, 15 minutes, 60 minutes, there's this whole drop down here. But if you want to change a time that is not there, look at the syntax. 15 minutes is minus 15. What if I wanted 45 minutes? Then I just do minus 45. Or even better, what if I wanted 15 minutes worth of data, but with an offset of 30 minutes? That's going to grab me 15 minutes worth of data, but starting 30 minutes ago. Or if you also wanted to do absolute times, like I want it from the 13th through the 15th, and I actually want it to start at 8 a.m. for example. You can do that kind of stuff here. Oops, 8, and then hit apply. It's going to reset the time, and you can then run that query with that as well. All right, so let's just use some relative ones. Let's do 60 minutes worth of data, and that's how you can easily pull that data. I also showed you how you can choose data with a filtered word. So if I want to only find metrics, logs that have the word Mozilla, I just enter the word Mozilla in it. Okay, so far so good. Let's say though that what I really want to do is I want to start finding how many 400s I have, or how many client errors or server errors I'm getting. If I just pushed out code, let's say that I'm a developer and I just pushed out code, I want to find out if my level of 404s increased. Or if I'm the IT ops, I just want to know what the trend looks like with my 404s and my 200s. So the 200 is found in here. How can I go about and let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys. How can I go about and get that stuff? What we want to do is we want to parse the log file, the log message, so we can start getting these fields. I'm going to show you the simplest way first, and then I'm going to show you some other examples. What you do is you can highlight any of these messages, highlight the area you want to parse, and you're going to get an option to be able to parse that text. In this case, I'm going to parse the selected text, and I'm going to say, all right, if you find anything in between get and HTTPS, I want you to take that and call that the URL. If you find anything after that HTTPS, sorry, this one here, with 2 spaces next to it, that's going to be my status code. And if you find anything after that, that's going to be the size of the message, and you get the point. All I'm doing is I'm using a message as an example to be able to parse out the different fields. I'm going to grab this to make it easy. I'm going to call this a user agent. All right. So what I did is I took an example of a message and I said, grab these fields, these fields, these fields here, and these are the names for it. And what it did is it created that parsing statement for me. I could have typed it myself, but to be honest, I fat finger stuff a lot, so it was easier that I could use that. And if I run this query again, same thing. I just click on that start button, runs the query. Now look at this pretty cool thing. Here is my message still on the right-hand side, but parsed out of that message is the user agent. There's the URL. There's the status code. There's the size. There's the referrer. So I have all this data already parsed out, which allows me to do things like, what if I want to do a count by URL? I want to see where stuff is coming, where stuff is going. I get a count by URLs. I can sort it. I can look at it from any way I want to. And I'll show you a lot more in a little bit. I'm showing you some very, very basic aggregation, but you clearly start seeing how I can, by parsing, I'm giving context. I'm giving structure to this data. So if I do a count by status code, there you go. Here, fortunately for me, this is a production environment, and most of my stuff is 200. Yes, I have some 404s down here, but they're not that big compared to my 200s. Right? Okay, before I go any further, let's talk a little bit more about parsing. I just showed you this thing called parse anchor. It's the easiest form of parsing. Let me take you to documentation to show you a couple of other things. I'm going to show you the easy way to get to documentation. You can open up here. You can go to help and just click on documentation. And that's going to be, the nice thing about it is that it's context sensitive. It's going to know where you are, and it's going to open it up to what you're doing. So we're looking at the query language. We're looking at a log query, so it just popped us up in that query language. But in particular, what I wanted to show you was these different parse operators. What I showed you first was this first one called parse predictable patterns using an anchor. The reason I was able to use an anchor is because Apache Access has a very predictable pattern. We always know where the status code is found. We always know where the URL is found. So I used that very simple UI tool to parse out a message like that. But not always do we have that benefit. Sometimes we have variable patterns. And in that case, you can use regex. I would bet that 100% of you on the call have used regex in the past. But if you haven't, let me just show you very quickly here. I'm going to grab this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm going to show you this example in here. What this example is doing is saying, okay, go and find up to between 1 and 3 digits, and then that's going to be followed by a period, and 1 and 3 digits followed by a period, 1 and 3 digits followed by a period, 1 and 3 digits followed by a period. That sounds pretty much like an IP address, right? So find that pattern, and if you do, store it in a variable called IP address. So let me show you how that works. I'm going to grab that same exact thing. I'm going to go to my instance. I think it's here, and I am just going to add a new line in here and paste that. And let me get rid of this count for now. All right, so I just did a second parse statement. And if I run that now, you will see that I have an additional column here called IP address. So I just parsed, in addition to parsing the fields I had before, I also parsed the IP address. This shows you that you can have multiple parse statements. They don't all have to be parse anchor. They don't all have to be parse regex. And this is going to start allowing you to look at your data and analyzing your data. Okay. There is a raised hand. I don't know if that is a question or not. Arturo, if you have a question, feel free to add it to the questions tab, and I'll be happy to answer that question. Okay, let's continue here. So there are many other ways of parsing your data that I'm just going to talk about. If you're sending us JSON logs, JSON format logs, guess what? We know what those look like, and we can parse it easily for you. If you're sending us key value pairs, something like name equals Mario, company equals Sumo Logic, we know what that format looks like, and we can parse it. CSV, or what if you're sending us stuff that is using a tab or a colon? You can use the split operator, XML, and so on. So we make it fairly easy for you to be able to parse your data. But now that you've heard that you can parse your data, I want to show you something even cooler. You can create what we call field extraction rules. And what field extraction rules do is they parse your data as it's getting ingested. Why is that? Well, you don't want to be creating this every single time. Every time you run, you don't want to type all this parse statement and figure it out and sort of sort it. So what you can do is you can create a rule and say, anytime you get data for Lab Apache Access, just parse this out for me. Get all that data for me because I want to start using it. And that's what a field extraction rule is. I'm going to show you here how they get built. Mind you, only administrators can build field extraction rules, but anybody can benefit from them. So I'm going to go to Settings, and under Settings, I have field extraction rules. And there's quite a few built already, but let me show you. Let's say that I wanted to build one for my Palo Alto networks. I can click on this plus sign. I can say Palo Alto networks. Let's say that the scope is source category equals Palo Alto network. I'm just going to make it easy for now. Let's say that that's what we're stamping our data with. I can then here knock myself silly writing the parsing expression that I want. Or for those that we actually know, like for Palo Alto networks, we actually get you started with a template. So I can say use that template, and here is the parsing statement that that's going to get me that data for the Palo Alto networks. If I had more fields, I can add them. I can say field 1, field 2, and of course that would need to include 2 more stars in here because I'm pairing it up with those, right? So there you go. That's how you go about creating a field extraction rule. And as soon as that data starts ingesting, it's going to start and make all those fields available to every single user within Sumo, every user in your organization. As a matter of fact, look at this one. I already had, let me just edit this so you can see it. I already had an Apache Access one that says, if I get anything where source category equals Lab Apache Access, all right, let's use these parse expressions. And by the way, these look different because they're all using parse regex, but it's doing the exact same thing. The source IP, the method, the URL, the status code, the size, the refer, and so on. So because this field already exists, because this field extraction rule already exists, let me show you a little trick here. If I go and run my query, so remember that I ran this query and it parsed out all those fields for me. Well, if I go and just run the basic query that I had originally, so no parsing or anything of that, look at this. Over here on the left-hand side, which I hadn't talked about before, I have what is called the field browser. And that field browser already has the status code, the IP address, the URL, the user agent, because my field extraction rule has parsed it for me. So I know which fields are available to me by looking at this in here. It goes even a step further, and it gathers a lot of information. It can tell me that that these are the top 10 URLs. This one blog index shows up 6,000 times, 6,500, and it's about 15% of everything in there. Or for my status codes, it shows me that the value that I get the most is a 200. About 70% of my requests are 200 responses in there. Right, so you get the point. I'm getting these metrics, or these fields, I should say, that I can start using. So now I can easily do a count by status code. without even having to parse, because status code is a field that already exists. Great, great, great. I don't see any questions, so let me continue with it. So step one for you is parse your data. If you're brand spanking new to Sumo Logic, or if your company is brand spanking new to Sumo Logic, figure out what data you want, figure out what the fields you want to extract, and create those field extraction rules. It's going to make it so much easier for you and your team, especially because you no longer have to do all the parse statements, and you will also start using the same naming convention. The variables are going to be called the same thing, and if you're looking at someone else's dashboard, you know what those variables mean in the dashboards themselves. Okay, so that's how you go about and you start parsing your data. Now you can start filtering your data, you can start aggregating your data, you can start doing all these things. Here's where I talked about that you're using your metadata, using keywords. I showed you how to use the time ranges as well. You could do additional anchor parsing like I was showing you before. You can do parse regex. Here's all the other operators I was showing you for additional formats in the operation. Of course, there's all the usual suspects when it comes to operators. You have a where operator, so in this case I can say where status code is not 304. You have the if operator to do the basic if-else statements. You have a whole bunch of other filtering operators in there. Unfortunately, I cannot go through all of them today. There's quite a bit. As a matter of fact, I want to show you that there is a cheat sheet. There's a great cheat sheet here. If you go into our help and you just type cheat sheet, it's already spelled there for me. There is a cheat sheet called the search operators cheat sheet, and what this does is it's a one-pager or a one screen where it shows you all different operators broken by functionality. So here it is, all the parsing ones. Remember, I showed you parse, anchor, parse regex, key value, CSV, JSON, and all that good stuff. Here's some aggregating operators, the standard ones, right? Average, count distinct. There's some other interesting ones that allow you to do more stuff like, hey, fill the missing nulls with zeros and that kind of stuff. Min, max, percentage, standard deviation. So all the operators are in here, and if you want to find out how to use them, you can just click on that operator name, and it's going to take you to the page, which shows you the syntax of how to use it. It shows you examples, and it's pretty straightforward on how to use these in there as well. Okay, so with that in mind, let me show you the interesting ones. So the simple one, just for time's sake, I'm going to skip these. They're pretty straightforward. You want the average size by source IP, or you just want to count by source IP. These are the easy ones. Let me show you some of the most the noteworthy ones. Some of the ones that you're going to be using as you start creating your data. Let me cheat a little bit again. I'm going to go in here, and fortunately for me, I actually have a lot of these queries already built. So I'm going to go to that personal folder, and in here I have a training folder, and I have some training queries here that I'm going to show you guys. So let me open, how about, let's open this one, GeoLookup, and let's open this outlier, and let's open predict. I'm trying to take you to the ones that are a little more interesting rather than just the same basic ones that you probably will be able to do on your own pretty easily. And let's see if I have any data in my GitHub account to run this. Okay, let's see. I don't have any data. Let's see if I try to get the last 24 hours. This is a training environment that not always do I have data for this, but looks like I don't. Okay, no worries. Let me show you this other one. So here's a good one. This is the GeoLookup that you saw before. Let me run this for like the last 60 minutes, and it's going to generate a map like this one, which shows me all the data points where my clients are hitting from. Well, how do you build that? Well, let me show you. The query is pretty straightforward. First thing is, I want to see all the data from source category labs Apache Access. Then I am using a parse statement to parse the IP address, right? Remember, I could have not used this because that IP address has already been parsed. So this would also work. I could just run that without that parse statement, and it should work because my IP address had already been parsed. Now I'm using this lookup operator, and this lookup operator allows me to pull some fields from there, latitude and longitude, from this service that we provide to you on the IP address itself. So let me just take you to the search operator called geolookup, so you can command F geo. Oh, let's see, geolookup. Here we go. So let's look at how this operator works. It allows you to create. Oh, looks like my map is not. There we go. It allows you to create a map like this by using an example like this, right? As a matter of fact, I'm just looking up latitude and longitude, but there's a whole bunch of other fields. Let's just grab them. I'm going to go here, grab these fields, go to that geolookup. I'm going to add these fields to my query. I'm going to add all these fields. So grab all those fields and then count them by those fields. And what that results in is, actually before I do that, let me show you what the table view of the initial query looks like. It has the latitude and the longitude and a count, but now that I added all these fields, I'm going to get all those fields as well. So I get latitude, longitude, country code, country name, region, and all that good stuff from that same thing. What if I wanted only those with country code equals US? You guys, I think, already guessed it. It's pretty straightforward. All I have to do is, once I have that field, I use a where clause. Where, what's the field name? Country code. Where country code equals, and then I just specify the value that I want. And if all goes well, I am going to have now only those where country code equals US. And if I map that now, I should be able to see only a map of the US with those fields in there. Right, so pretty straightforward. You see how I can take, you see how I can search queries that already exist. You see how I can edit them and start creating my own queries. I want to show you one that is going to be very, very, very useful for you guys. I'm just going to run this query right now and show you the results first. As a matter of fact, show you the diagram first. So what this is showing me is outliers in my 404s. Do I have a huge spike in my 404s? And if so, you know, map them out with an outlier. So here you go. This one is saying, give me everything that is Lab Apache Access, but only those that have a status code of 404. Oh, I haven't even talked about time slice, but time slice allows me to break my results into time buckets. So at 10 a.m., this is broken into 5-minute buckets. Look at that, or actually into 1-minute buckets. Sorry, there it is, 1 minute. So at 10, 10, 10, 11, 10, 12, 10, 15, what this is doing is it's plotting how many 404s I had for each one of these minute periods. And since I ran this for 60 minutes, there's 60 data points in here. I did a count of how many messages I have. I just renamed it server error, but it really is just a count. And then what I did is I said, okay, I want to do an outlier on that count, meaning look at any data point in here. Let's take this one. Look at any data point in here. And let me actually grab just the last 15 minutes, see if that gives us a better diagram to be able to explain. Okay, well, it's kind of the same. What it's saying is, look at this data point and go back 5 data points. That's what this window 5 equals 5 means. Go back 5 data points, and according to those 5 data points, figure out what should be the standard deviation at this data point that we are now. And that's what this is. Threshold means how many standard deviations do I care for. So I'm going to say, if I say 3, I should get less outliers because I'm making the standard deviation bigger. Notice? In this case over here, my standard deviation is pretty big because it's including this data point. So if I'm going back 5 points, if I'm here and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it takes into account this big spike and it makes my standard deviation much bigger at those points in time. So outlier is a great way to avoid what we call static thresholds. Instead of saying, oh, just tell me whenever I have a count higher than 2,000, we can say, no, look at the previous history, and according to that, figure out if I should have if I should alert or not. So this is the beginning of how to start alerting, how to identify these outliers in Sumo. Okay, I'm going to show you one more in here called the predict, and this one's pretty straightforward. Predict allows me to look at the data that I've received so far. In this case, I'm counting the number of requests that my web servers are getting, and I'm going to do a forecast of 10 data points ahead of time. And since each slice is 5 minutes, that's 50 minutes worth of data that I'm projecting. So here is the actual data in light blue, and here is the data itself as it is projecting in the future what will happen. A good use case for this, which I don't have an example, is what if I'm taking tickets from a queue and I want to find out when will that queue hit 0. So think of this blue line as coming slanting down, and I can see when it will hit 0, and that gives me a good forecasting of what I'm doing in there. Okay, so I've shown you quite a bit in here. I've shown you a few of these others. I showed you log reduce yesterday. Due to time, I might not be able to show you log compare, but I do want to show you something called Livetail. And I think for those of you who don't know about it, you're going to love it. Livetail allows me to tail logs. So I can do something like source category, source category equals labs Apache access. Why is this important? Well, most of you or some of you might be developers who don't even have access to your production environment. And now all of a sudden through this UI, you're able to tail the logs in that production environment, not only in that host, but across all hosts that have a source category labs Apache access. So you can see how this becomes very easy, very helpful. I can say I only want those that have the word Mozilla, and you can even highlight things. I want to see only those that say 404, that say Mozilla, that say error, and it starts highlighting those terms for you so that you can identify them easily. Scrolling up, you can pause it, you can scroll up, you can scroll down, you can jump to the bottom. So just a great way for you to be able to tail stuff in your environment. There is also, by the way, a CLI, a command line interface tool. So if you go here, let me just search it for you, CLI for Livetail. If I go and search this guy here, you can Livetail CLI. There we go. You can install it, and then you can run commands from your own command line. And you can do things like this. You can do something like, all right, run Livetail, search for source category equals Apache apps access, and then pipe that, and then grep it and search for something or other, and then send that over to an out.txt file. So you can do combinations of that kind of stuff, which we found very popular with our users. Okay, so I did tell you about the fact that I'm showing you a lot of the stepping stones and how, oh, here's Livetail. Good. About how to create a lot of this stuff. But at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to start creating dashboards. You want to start creating alerts. You want to, if you remember that demo that I showed you, it was all based on those dashboards showing me what's happening in my environment. It was based on those alerts telling me when to look at that data. And that's where we want to get to. So let's begin with dashboards. In short, dashboards are a collection of panels. That data can be coming from anywhere you want. But basically, it's just panels that are put together. And how to build a dashboard is incredibly easy. As a matter of fact, let's do one ourselves. I'm going to go in here and grab this one here. Let's say outlier, and I want to plot this. It's as easy as clicking Add to Dashboard. It's going to ask me, oh, what do you want that title of the panel to be? Let's say that I want to call it 404 alerts or 404 outliers, right? And it says, okay, where do you want to add it? Do you want to add it to an existing dashboard? These are all your dashboards, and you can add it to an existing one. Or do you want to just add it to a brand new dashboard? So let's call this the brand new dashboard. I'm going to create a brand new dashboard, click on Add. It's going to ask me, where do you want to save that dashboard? Let's just put it in my personal folder. Click on Add. And I just created a dashboard that, yeah, it just has one panel, but that's a good beginning for my dashboard itself. The cool thing about this is where I can start creating and adding whatever I want. Let's say that I wanted to add this geo lookup query here. Again, add to dashboard. I can add it to my existing brand new dashboard. I'm going to call this like Apache visitors. Oops, visitors. My keyboard's not behaving, and you notice now I have a second panel in my existing dashboard. It's as simple as that. You can start adding your panels. You can move things around. You can even do things like perhaps adding non-text panels. Like I wanted to add a title panel. This is my dashboard. All right, and I can click submit. Or probably more interesting, you might want to add a text panel, because you are the one who built. You're the one who built the dashboard, but it could be someone else reading it and looking at what's in there. So, by the way, this is in Spanish. That's why you can't understand what it says. You can add links to other dashboards as well. So I'm going to add here a link to this other dashboard. Click add, and if I click submit, it just creates a nice little something that allows me to look into those dashboards as well. There, you can move things around. Perhaps I want to move this guy all the way to the top and move it all the way out here. Right, and there you go. In less than 5 minutes, I was able to take my queries that existed, plop them into a dashboard. There's a few other things which I'll encourage you to play with. You can toggle the theme, because a few of us prefer the dark theme. You can delete it, star it, refresh it, full screen, and all that good stuff. The one thing I'm going to say is, whenever you create a dashboard, don't be shy to share it with your peers. If you don't share it, nobody's ever going to know about it. People are going to be recreating the wheel. So whenever you can, share, share, share. You notice right now, share with nobody. I can say I can share it with the organization, meaning anybody within my org that has access to Sumo Logic. I can share it with the world, which means there is a link that is going to be provided, and I can share that link with anybody, even if they don't have access to my Sumo Logic instance, and they still would be able to see that dashboard. Or the last one in there was I could whitelist certain IP addresses, and only those people would have access to that kind of stuff. Okay. So share as much as you can. The last thing I'm going to show you is you can also add filters. So adding filters to dashboards allow you to use those dashboards as templates. Perhaps I want to, perhaps people use this dashboard to look at certain IP addresses and see if they're giving us grief. Let's change the label and say enter IP. Let's say enter rogue IP address. Oops, great. And so rogue, my goodness. Okay, click on save, and you notice that now I have a little filter in here, and I could enter 127.0.0.23, let's say, and then I run that, and all the panels would get reset to that IP address. Of course, it doesn't exist, so there's no data, but you see how I can use these filters as to create templates so that I can share these dashboards with other people in the organization, and we're all looking at what we need from those dashboards. Okay, I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to do the last thing, which is I'm going to show you alerts. Alerts are super, super, super easy to build. As a matter of fact, let's take this outlier alert, and let's say that I wanted to alert every time I have a pink triangle. That's when the thing's spiked, and I want to alert on that. Let's look at the table itself. And what you'll notice is when I have a spike, this field here is set to 1. So all I really need to do is I need to find out when server error count equals 1. So I'm going to add to this query a pipe and say where server error count is greater than 0. All right. Now, with this query, with this where clause, now, if I have oh look, this is great. I don't have any outliers, which means in the last 15 minutes, everything seems to be okay. But let's pick a bigger time frame, because we know that there was that big spike, right? We're just out of that 15-minute time period. There you go. If I'm choosing 60 minutes, it's telling me, oh yeah, you do have four cases where the server error count was set to 1. So if I look at, if I were to look at the line, I need to get rid of this where clause. If I were to look at the line in here, I would probably see 4 pink triangles. In this case, it's looking at 3 pink triangles in there. There could be 2 in here. All right, so with this where clause in here in place, I now know that I have some violations and I can set up some alerts. To set up the alerts, mechanics for this is very easy. I save my query, and part of saving that query, I get the ability to schedule a search. And I can say I want this query to run, let's say, on an hourly basis. I can specify the time zone that I want it to run. I want to send a notification either every time the search is complete, or probably more interesting, I want to send a notification if the following condition is met. So I can choose the condition and say where the number of results is greater than 0. So if I get 0 results, that's good, because that means I had no errors. Remember this where clause? But if I get more than 0 results, if I get 1 result or more, then I should be alerted about that. And that's it. That's all you have to do to be able to build out your alert. Now, there's several types of alerts. I can do an email alert, which is the easiest. I can say, yep, I want to send this alert to Mario at Sumo. I want the header to say this. It knows it's not a valid one. Let's say this. I want to send it with this email subject. By the way, anything that has $1 in front of it is a variable, and here's the variables available to you. And what do I want to include in the message? I can include the search query, the results, a histogram, and I can even include the results as a CSV attachment. Mind you, this is not meant to export data, so we limit it to a small number. There is an export functionality that you can do from here for your results, so this is not meant to replace that. All right, so I can send as an email, which is pretty straightforward. But let me talk about what other ones are available to you. Script action. Script action means I can have this alert trigger a script. It's a custom script of yours. Sumo doesn't know any, Sumo has no idea what that script does. All it knows is where it sits and what is it written in Perl and Ruby and Python, so that I know how to call that script. But that's the ability to let you trigger a script from an alert. If you're using ServiceNow, ServiceNow is a ticketing system. Sumo allows you to a tight integration with ServiceNow to open tickets within ServiceNow. Let's talk about these last two ones. Webhook is the ability to send the message over to anything that has a REST API. So I think I have some examples here. I've built one for HipChat, I've built one for Slack, but you can build it for PagerDuty, Datadog, or just about anything that there is a REST API, you can build those things. I don't have time to show you how to build those connections, but for those of you joining future webinars, we do cover that in there. The last one in here is save to index, and this is a great one. What this does is, if you have a query that it's pulling out, let's say, I don't know, some random errors that you normally don't see, you can save that into a new index called my error index, or my errors, for example. And what that does is it's going to create a new little bucket called my errors, and you can go search your results from there, so you don't have to run the search all over again. Let me just cancel out of this. I'm going to show you where that shows up. So remember that I was showing you in the logs there's all this metadata. If you had that, you could create index equals, I think we called it my errors, and this would allow you to query that little bucket with all the errors that you have put aside through the alerts themselves. So there you go. As you see, creating alerts is pretty straightforward. It allows you to have these different alert types. I will be sending you these. I want to point you to this in particular. There's a difference of creating alerts and a difference of creating meaningful alerts. And by meaningful, we mean alerts that you can act on versus just alerts that are noise. We cover this a lot more in the next webinar using Sumo Logic, but if you want to get a head start, you can take a peek at this link, and it's going to talk a little bit about that. All right, I covered a lot. I talked a lot, and you're probably thinking, okay, this is great, I can start it, but if at some point you need a little more help, where can you go from here? Fortunately for you, within the UI, if you go back to the UI and if you go to that home tab of yours, by the way, this is only available in the new Bento UI and the new UI itself, there is a Learn tab right here. If you click on that Learn tab, it has some videos that we're highlighting for you to start. It has some tutorials that we suggest you try. You can, from here, launch a query to a support ticket to our support team. You can get to docs. You can get to our training site and find out what other sessions are happening. You can request a feature. We highly recommend that if there's something you want to see, let us know. We prioritize these and we try to get the features that make sense to our users. The one that I really want to point out is this one called Community. This is really, really useful for both searching what other people have posted in here. Let's say that you're looking for examples on using the outlier operator. You can click on that, and it shows you here how to compare an alert on historical data. That's probably using outlier as well. Is it possible to remove outliers from a graph? Outlier must pick up data. So you notice how you have a lot of examples here, answers of how you can use outlier, in addition to you being able to create a post. So that you don't find the answer you're looking for, you can always go and into Community and create a new post in there and get some answers from our experts, including some other users that are out there. So I cannot encourage you enough. As much as I can encourage you, go into Sumo Logic, and that's going to be a great place for you to start to get answers to a lot of your questions themselves. All right, so with that said, that is my story. I'm going to stick to it. Let me open it up to questions from the audience. And by the way, I'm going to pause the recording for now.